The Eighth Amendment is a little bit more complex, a little more complicated. Who can tell me what the Eighth Amendment refers to?
Cruel and unusual punishment.
Cruel and unusual punishment. Yep. The Eighth Amendment is all about cruel and unusual punishment. So here's the thing. Prisoners are sent to prison as punishment, not for punishment. Prisoners are sent to prison as punishment, not for punishment, means that the prison is the punishment. That's it, right there. The loss of freedom, being removed from your community and confined, is the punishment. Therefore, we cannot add to that punishment by the things that we do in the facility. Does that make sense? So we're going to be looking at corporal punishment, use of force, and conditions of confinement. Things like inhumane living conditions, failure to meet basic needs, personal safety, neglect of medical care. So let us begin corporal punishment. Corporal punishment, physical punishment, punishment of the body. We can't do that anymore. So torture or physical punishment is banned. Remember the whole Abu Ghraib thing back in the early 2000s? Where United States soldiers were torturing Iraqi detainees. You can't do that. You can't do that. You can't torture people. Now, as recently as, I want to say the 1960s, maybe in the early 70s, there was this device called the Tucker telephone that was used by several southern prison systems, notably Arkansas, Mississippi, down in that neck of the woods. Now, you see the old phone here. Way back from, like the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, like that, maybe even into the 50s. There might have been a few left around. Think of the Tucker telephone then, in the 60s and 70s, as the rotary dial phones now. You don't use a rotary dial phone, but I'll bet you've seen one in your lifetime. Maybe your grandma's got one. Maybe there's one in the attic or the basement. They're around. You might not use them, but they're around. You could still get your hands on them if you wanted to. And that's how these phones were then. Now, these phones had a little crank or a generator on them. Right? So you would crank it up, and that would give you the electrical connection to connect to the line and make your phone call, right? So what they would do in these prison systems is they would disassemble these phones and just take the generator part out, and they would connect wires and electrodes to the generator. And if a prisoner was misbehaving or not working hard, well, they would connect those electrodes to personal and private places on the prisoner, and they would make a long-distance phone call, resulting in injury and disfigurement to quite a number of prisoners. Pretty bogus, would you agree? So the Supreme Court says, hello, excuse me, what part of cruel and unusual punishment do you not understand? What part of no do you not understand? So they couldn't do that anymore. And mostly the states have fallen in line. Mostly this isn't a problem anymore, but every once in a while somebody does something silly. Texas, for example, back in the early 2000s, I believe, had a punishment for prisoners who were not working hard like they were supposed to, and they would handcuff them to a bar at the prison yard that was about yay high. So you can't quite kneel down, leaves you to stand up, and you're out in the hot Texas sun all day long with no food and water, no cover from the sun, not able to sit down. So the Supreme Court said, Texas, hello, no cruel and unusual punishment. What part of this do you not understand? And Texas goes, really, that's cruel and unusual? But mostly this is not a problem. So now we have use of force. Do we have to use force in corrections? Yeah, we most assuredly do. We got facilities all full of people that don't want to comply, right? They don't want to do what we need them to do. So yeah, sometimes we do need to use force. Use of force in and of itself is not wrong. It's unfortunately, a necessary part of corrections. But we cannot use excessive force. A reasonable force would be the amount of force that you need to control your situation, whatever that is. But once your situation is controlled, you stop using force. So you cannot use force beyond what is necessary to control the situation. So maybe you bring your CERT team in. You got a non-compliant prisoner in the cell, they're trashing their cell, they're flooding their cell, they're refusing to come out, they're refusing to come up, something. So you send your team in, okay? Well, once the guy's down and handcuffed, we're done. We're not going to continue using force. So if we maybe, gave him the old boots after the fact, well, that would be pretty excessive. Would you agree? And no punitive or retaliatory force. Punitive for punishment, retaliatory as payback. So you can't use it as punishment or payback. A prisoner did something that you didn't like. Or maybe you were in a roll around with a prisoner on the ground trying to get the cuffs on him, and somewhere in the middle of the roll around, he clocked you one. Maybe you caught an elbow upside the head, or fist in the face, or something like that. So now you're angry, and this is usually how it happens. Okay, you're all geeked up already on adrenaline from the situation, the fight, whatever you got yourself into, and then you get clocked one. And now you're mad. You got all this adrenaline cranking, and you give him a little boots to him, elbow him in the back of the neck, knee in the middle of the spine. Things like that. That's retaliatory or punitive. You're paying them back for something they did to you. Conditions of confinement. In other words, how do we keep people in our prisons? The question came up before the courts, is overcrowding or uncomfortable accommodations a violation of the 8th Amendment? Is it somehow cruel and unusual? Is it adding to the punishment of the loss of liberty? So you see a couple of guys in a typical cell, 2 men living in it with all of their stuff, and yeah, it's a little crowded there. It looks a little uncomfortable. Inmates alleged that it was, in fact, cruel and unusual punishment. The courts took a look at that case and said, not so much. Because the courts evaluated that case in terms of the totality of conditions. Totality meaning total, or all of the conditions of confinement. So in this case, the prisoners who were making the allegations said, it's just cruel and unusual punishment to be cramped in here with another person like this. The court said, no, not in your case. Because in your case, the only time that you are required to be in your cell is to sleep. And the other 16 hours of the day, you are free to be out of your cell. You can go to programs, you can go out to the housing unit, you can go to the yard. You're not cramped in your cell. We're not forcing you to be in there. So if you want to be in there, you choose to be in there for more than sleeping, that's entirely up to you. So the court said, no, in view of the totality of conditions, not so. But this is the reason that in maximum security, where they're single cell, and they're locked down for 23 hours a day, that is why they're single cell. That's why we have to do it max, because in view of the totality of conditions, somebody locked down 23 hours a day, the court said, yeah, that would be cruel and unusual if they were double booked. It would just be too crowded. Failure to meet basic needs. Let's start with food. Food must be nutritionally adequate. The food provided must sustain the longitudinal health of an adult human being. It has to have enough vitamins and nutrients and all the important things that a human body needs in it. So I'm sure in the old prison movies you've seen the whole bread and water diet. We put you in the hole and feed you bread and water. Well, we can't do that anymore. Now that doesn't mean our hands are tied if somebody is misbehaving with their food. Maybe we got a prisoner that will not return food trays or utensils. Maybe we've got a prisoner that's throwing their food around the cell or other people. Well, we have this wonderful concoction called Food Loaf or Nutriloaf. And what we do is we take whatever food that was on the tray that everybody else had, or is going to have, and we run it through the blender. And we'll put everything in there, whatever the drink is, the whole 9 yards, and we'll even throw in a little egg and flour for binder. So if you look at it, they're actually getting more. And we pour it into a loaf pan and we bake it into a little food brick. But while its form may be altered, it is nutritionally exactly the same food as everybody else got. And more, because it's got egg and flour. So they can't say, well, you know, I'm being abused, I'm being mistreated, because it's all about the nutrition. And usually people who are on Food Loaf don't want to be on Food Loaf for very long. You can imagine. Clothing. Clothing must be adequate for both the climate and an inmate's privacy. Now in Michigan, we have 9 months of winter and 3 months of bad skiing, which means for a Michigan inmate, they need an overcoat. They need a hat. They need gloves, so when they go out in the yard, that they can be kept warm. Privacy. Well, you know, the standard issue pants and shirt and everything are more than adequate for privacy, but what some prisoners will do is they will expose themselves. They will rip out the crotch of their pants and expose themselves to others, often female officers. Now you might say, well, he was the one who ripped his pants out and he can wander around with his junk swinging free. But we can't do that. We have that whole privacy issue. So that means we need to reissue pants. This does not, however, prevent us from charging the prisoner for the cost of the pants. And if it continues, even charging the prisoner for destruction of prison property. But it does basically mean that we have to provide him with new pants. And if you keep ripping them out, we just got to keep giving him new pants and deal with it, you know, however we have to deal with it. Shelter. Now in the newer facilities, the ones that have been built, you know, in the 80s and on, this is generally not an issue. They were all built up to code and required specifications from the American Correctional Association, so not a problem. Where we find it an issue is in older facilities. So we're looking at noise levels. Prisons are very loud places, and of course in these great big monolithic big house prisons like they used to build, you can imagine the noise levels, right? The smaller facilities, not so much. Heating and cooling. So we have to provide adequate heat. Now our prisons are not air conditioned. Certain officer workspaces are, but not all of them. Mostly the officers are out in the same climate environment that the prisoners are. So, you know, if it's 100 degrees outside, you know, we're going to set up fans and everybody's working in 100-degree heat, except for, you know, the white shirts up front. And in high security prisons, the enclosed control rooms are also air conditioned, but everything else is what it is. So basically it's not looking at the cooling so much, except that we make an effort to provide fans and airflow and circulation. Mostly it's looking at the heating in the wintertime. That Housing units have to be kept, within a comfortable range. Ventilating, that we've got good airflow. Lighting have to be so many lumens per square feet. Plumbing, water pressure. Again, usually a problem in older facilities, not so much in the new ones. But somebody backed up the plumbing, then we have to fix it. Building maintenance. Cell size, there's actually a legal cell size, a number of square feet for an inmate in various conditions of confinement. So in maximum security, they get more square footage. In double booked cells, they get less square footage. Activity areas, what they must look like, how big they have to be. So again, mostly not a problem in new facilities. If you were to tour like Marquette Branch Prison, way up in the UP, it was built in the 1870s. If you were going to go down to Michigan Reformatory, we got a handful of older facilities, you might see issues. Sanitation. So here we're looking at anything that could endanger health. So it could be plumbing. Again, in older facilities, if their plumbing gets overwhelmed, you've got sewage backups, things like that, well, it's a pretty serious issue. And it's why you see jurisdictions like Midland County, for example, it's why they built a new jail. I toured their old jail, and I'm here to tell you, they had problems. They had some big problems up there. So they built a new jail. Saginaw County, they're going to be building a new jail. They've got their problems over there too, their facility is old. Facility and cell cleanliness. This is something that surprises a lot of people, but correctional facilities are actually very clean places. They're only dirty on TV. The only place that you're really going to find dirty in Department of Corrections is probably the public lobby. Where people are coming in, especially in the winter, they're tracking in mud and dirt and snow and stuff like that. So the lobby can get a little bit unsightly, but it's not unsanitary, it's just a little unsightly. And in jails, booking and intake. Just because you've got such a turnover and it's happening so fast, sometimes it's hard to stay on top of the issues down there, but we sure try. But the rest of the facility is clean. Prisons and jails are clean places. Food handling. In a prison or a jail kitchen, the same rules apply as apply in any restaurant. And there are regular inspections from the Department of Health. Presence of vermin. Most facilities have a contract with, pest control, pest removal. Periodically they used to come through and sweep the facility and spray around the perimeter and do all that kind of stuff to make sure that we didn't have any mice, rats, cockroaches, any of that stuff. Exercise. Now, we're going to make a distinction between exercise and recreation. But the law says that really all we have to provide is 1 hour out of the cell per week. That's it. And out of the cell literally means out of the cell. So way back in days gone by, what that would mean is that they would let a prisoner out of the cell, when they had the old barred cells and the catwalks and everything, and the prisoner could walk up and down the catwalk for their hour. And that was out of cell exercise. And some jails still do that because they don't have the facilities, they don't have the staffing, so they let the inmates out, go to the gym. Or, we don't have a gym, or the gym's being used as overflow housing, so yeah, walk up and down the tier. As long as they're out of their cell, that's for 1 hour. Now, we only have to offer it. We can't make them take their hour. So if you go around to a cell block and say, okay, who wants to go to the gym, and only 3 guys want to go to the gym, then that's it. So you just write down all the people that didn't go, document the ones that did, and we're covered. That's it. And once they get to the gym, if they just go to the gym and sit down, well, that's their business. It's not ours. We don't care. We made the offer, there they are, and how they use their time is entirely up to them. Personal safety. Personal safety. Here we are going to use what we call the deliberate indifference standard. Now, the courts aren't stupid. They know that jails and prisons are dangerous places. We know that. The prisoners know that. So it's not that we're going to protect everybody from everything all the time. We simply can't. But what it does mean is this right here, that we knowingly or neglectfully put an inmate in harm's way. This could include improper classification, inadequate searches, ignoring requests for protective custody. In the picture here, we see a child molester. He asked for protective custody. They put him in general population. He asked for protective custody because we learned that child molesters are the most despised of all criminals. He asked for protective custody. And they denied him. And he got the hell beat out of him. And he sued, and he won. We're back to the idea that the prison is the punishment, so we can't intentionally put somebody in harm's way, even though we might want to. We might say, yeah, you know, he's getting what he deserves. Let's put him in there and say, hey, child molester, because this is foreseeable. We know what's going to happen if we do that. The same as it is foreseeable if we take a black inmate and we put him in with the Aryan Brotherhood. You know, this is not rocket science. This is in the dog category. If we take the guy from the Aryan Brotherhood with all the tattoos on him, you know, swastikas and whatnot, we throw him in a cell block of predominantly black inmates. Not rocket science. We know what's going to happen. Rival gang members, right? We put those together. So anything that we do that's stupid like that, that's actionable. We can be sued. Improper classification, this is why classification is so important, so we don't wind up putting sharks in our goldfish bowl and somebody gets hurt because of that. Inadequate searches. Somebody's coming in from the sheet metal shop and going back into the housing unit. Well, we're probably going to want to do a pretty good search on that person. Just think of all the stuff that they could be bringing in from a sheet metal shop, right? So this is what we call the deliberate indifference standard. Deliberate means what?
On purpose.
What?
On purpose.
On purpose, intentional. And indifference? Good thing I'm checking. What's indifference? You're indifferent about something.
Don't care either way.
Yeah, you don't really care. So you intentionally did not care about this situation. And as a result of you intentionally not caring, somebody got hurt. Somebody got killed. And now it's actionable. Neglect of medical care. Our case law here is Estelle versus Gamble, 1976. This is probably one of the earliest cases of centering up the needs of the facility versus the rights of the inmate, even before Bell versus Wolfish. What Estelle versus Gamble did was to provide, let's say, a yardstick, a way to measure whether a prisoner's allegations about inadequate medical care were real or were actionable. So it becomes the standard to determine if the medical care that was deemed inadequate by a prisoner really is. Does it rise to the level of cruel and unusual punishment? So here was a case where we had overcorrected and prisoners were getting far too many rights, and we brought this back to center. And we said, okay, yes, prisoners need to have adequate medical care. Very much so. But for a prisoner to say, well, you know, I had a headache the other day and you didn't give me an aspirin, you know, that's cruel and unusual punishment. Yeah, not so much. Now we've got a yardstick, now we can measure it. The inadequate care, then, must rise to the level of deliberate indifference to a serious medical need. Now, make that mark. Is this deliberate indifference to a serious medical need? So deliberate indifference, intentionally not caring. The Supreme Court said could be an essential component of the healthcare delivery system is missing. So you have a facility full of inmates and yet you have no healthcare staff. You have maybe no examination room, or maybe you have no medicines or means to treat the inmate, right? Something that you really need to have in your healthcare delivery system just isn't there. There is an extremely inadequate response, or even no response at all to a serious medical need. So I'm going to be a little facetious here to make my point. But let's say that you're a corrections officer and a prisoner has been shanked, and he's got an arterial spurt going. Right? He's spray painting the cell. And you go, here, have a Band-Aid. Pretty inadequate. Or no response at all. You go, oh, hey, I see you're bleeding. Shift change in 5 minutes, I'll let the other shift know. No response. Obviously nobody would do that, God, I hope not. But inadequate response, no response to a serious medical need, which the courts have defined for us as treatment or medication ordered by medical staff. So an inmate is sick or has some sort of medical condition, they've ordered a specific treatment or medication, and either the prison denies it, or maybe a specific officer doesn't deliver it when they're supposed to. Maybe they're supposed to have some, maybe dialysis or something, and they're in renal failure, and the prison doesn't transport them for dialysis in a timely fashion, and they die. Or an inmate's sick and he's supposed to have an antibiotic 4 times a day, but he's only getting it 3 times a day or 2 times a day. Serious illness or injury, obvious to a layperson, that's you or me. People without medical training, the average John Q or Jane Q citizen. So, if it was a serious illness or injury, the kind that you would seek immediate medical attention for, then that probably means you should be taking care of that inmate too. The courts expect us to exercise a modicum of common sense, and that we as adults have a pretty good idea of what is or is not serious. If it's something that can wait till the next day for sick call, or if it's something that you would wait to go to the doctor to, well then it's not a serious illness or injury. But if it's something that required emergency attention, and you refuse to do that, well, that's a whole different deal, right? So we're looking at the difference between an inmate that maybe broke a finger or a toe at a basketball game. Now, I don't know if you've broken any fingers or toes, but I have. And you know what they do at the doctor's office? They tape it to its neighbor. They tell you to take some aspirin and try not to use it too much. So does that sound like it's a very serious thing? Not so much. But maybe they broke an arm or a leg instead. Does that change the scenario? Yeah, you bet it does. Absolutely. So something like that, or an illness, obvious to a layperson. We had a guy one day, we were in the middle of our security rounds, shining the flashlight in the cell, and a prisoner is up, and he's over by the toilet, and he's on his knees in front of the toilet. So we flip on the light and say, hey, what's going on? Are you doing okay? He said, I don't know. He said, I think there's something wrong with me. He says, I'm puking up blood, and when I sit down, he says, I've got it coming out of my other end too. Well, blood shouldn't be coming out of either end. So we immediately transported it into the hospital. So something like that, does that make sense?